President Trump announced a major unilateral ceasefire in the Middle East conflict this morning, a move he called a bold step toward lasting peace. Within minutes, Iran's supreme leader issued a blistering rejection, calling the offer a deceptive trap and vowing to intensify attacks, setting the stage for a dramatic and dangerous escalation. Right? You had President Trump, in a surprise address from the White House Rose Garden just after 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, declaring, "The United States is taking the first step. We are stopping our fire. We call on all nations in the region to join this pause for peace." According to a White House official speaking to Axios, the plan involved an immediate 72-hour halt to all U.S. offensive operations, intended as a humanitarian window. But the reaction from Tehran wasn't just a no, it was a full-on, cinematic villain rejection scene. You had Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, taking to state television within the hour, stating, "The so-called ceasefire of the arrogant American government is nothing but a trick. It is gaslighting on an international scale. Our response will be decisive and painful." A senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commander, quoted by the Fars news agency, added, "Our operations will not only continue but will expand in scope and strength until the occupiers are driven from the region." So, let's break down the POV from both sides. From Trump's camp, this is being framed as the ultimate peacemaker move. A senior administration official, briefing reporters on background, argued this puts the moral and strategic onus squarely on Iran. The world sees who wants peace and who wants endless war. Supporters are already flooding social media, hailing it as a masterstroke that exposes Iranian aggression. But the immediate, visceral rejection from Iran has analysts and officials worldwide scrambling. Reuters is reporting that European diplomats were caught completely off guard, with one EU source calling the rapid-fire sequence of announcement and rejection a diplomatic neutron bomb. The Dow Jones plummeted over 400 points on the news, and Brent crude oil spiked by 8% to over $104 a barrel, with experts cited by Bloomberg warning of the most significant supply shock since the Gulf War if hostilities explode. The stage is now set for what multiple Pentagon officials, speaking to NBC News, are calling a worst-case scenario escalation. U.S. Central Command has reportedly placed all forces in the region on highest alert. You had the commander of U.S. Naval Forces Central Command stating, "We are prepared to defend our forces and protect freedom of navigation, but the ball is in Iran's court." So here's the multi-billion-dollar, World War-adjacent question everyone in the Situation Room and watching at home is screaming at their screens: why did Iran reject Trump's peace initiative so forcefully? Was this a calculated move to paint America as the aggressor no matter what? Is there an internal power play in Tehran we're not seeing? Or did Trump just walk into a geopolitical ambush, handing Iran the perfect propaganda victory and the pretext for the next, even more devastating phase of this conflict? The world is holding its breath. Gas prices are about to hit your wallet like a sledgehammer, and the risk of a direct, catastrophic superpower clash just went from red line to scarlet. This isn't just a rejection. It's a declaration of a whole new, terrifying game. And your POV? We need to hear it. Tehran, Iran, in a dramatic escalation that threatens to shatter the fragile peace initiative, Iran has publicly accused Israel of violating the U.S.-brokered ceasefire within hours of its announcement, framing its planned military retaliation as a legitimate and necessary response to Israeli aggression. The accusation came late Tuesday, with Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, Nasser Kanani, stating in a televised address, while the American president speaks of a humanitarian pause, his Zionist allies continue their acts of terror. This morning, Israeli warplanes struck positions in southern Syria, targeting our advisors. This is not a ceasefire, it is a deceitful cover for continued aggression. The statement, carried by Iran's state-run IRNA news agency, directly challenges the core of President Trump's diplomatic effort. U.S. and Israeli officials have offered conflicting accounts. A Pentagon spokesperson, speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity, confirmed defensive airstrikes were conducted against what they called imminent threats from Iranian-backed militias in Syria, but insisted the operations fell outside the scope of the 72-hour ceasefire, which they defined as pertaining only to the Iran-Israel theater. This was a counterterrorism action in a third country, not a violation of the pause, the official said. However, from Tehran's POV, this is the ultimate gotcha moment. You had a senior commander in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, Brigadier General Esmail Ghani, telling the Tasnim news agency, "The mask has slipped. The so-called humanitarian window was a trap, and now the trap has been sprung by the Zionists themselves. Our response will be calibrated, but it will be devastating." So, let's break down the chessboard. For President Trump supporters, this Israeli action is being framed as a justified, defensive move that proves Iran's proxies were planning attacks anyway. A Trump campaign surrogate, appearing on Fox News, argued, "This shows the president was right all along. You can't trust the Iranian regime. They use ceasefires to rearm and reposition. Israel had every right to defend itself, and this exposes Iran's bad faith for the entire world to see. But for the international community and markets, this is the nightmare scenario. The immediate Iranian accusation has effectively nullified the ceasefire before it even began. You had the United Nations Secretary-General spokesperson stating they are deeply concerned by the reports of strikes and the Iranian statements, urging maximum restraint. More tangibly, Brent crude oil, which had stabilized just below $100 a barrel after Trump's announcement, surged another 6% to $106 on the news, according to Bloomberg data. Analysts at Goldman Sachs, cited by the Financial Times, warned that any kinetic response from Iran targeting energy infrastructure could push prices toward $120. The critical question now, the cliffhanger that has every intelligence agency from Langley to Mossad on high alert, is the nature of Iran's promised retaliation. U.S. intelligence officials, briefing NBC News, assess that Iran is likely to avoid a direct strike on Israeli soil, which would guarantee a massive U.S. response. Instead, they predict a high-probability, high-impact attack on global shipping in the Strait of Hormuz or on oil facilities in a Gulf allies' territory. They want to inflict economic pain on the West and make Trump look weak, without giving him a clear casus belli, one former CIA officer specializing in Iran told CNN. You also had the commander of Iran's aerospace force, Amir Ali Hajizadeh, issuing a veiled threat that points to this strategy: our reach is long, and our patience is exhausted. Those who depend on the flow of oil should look at the map and understand who controls the choke points. Haifa, Israel. In a dramatic and devastating escalation, Iran launched a massive missile barrage targeting the port of Haifa early Thursday morning local time, striking what is widely considered Israel's economic lifeline and triggering widespread explosions and major fires. The attack, which Israeli defense officials confirm involved dozens of ballistic missiles and drones, represents the most direct and severe kinetic strike on Israeli soil since the conflict began, fundamentally shifting the war's dynamics. Initial reports from the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, and footage verified by Reuters show multiple impacts across the port's critical infrastructure, including container terminals and fuel storage facilities. Thick, black plumes of smoke are visible for miles. Israeli emergency services have declared a mass casualty event, with early estimates from Magen David Adom, Israel's National Emergency Service, citing scores of injuries and ongoing rescue operations. The scale of the damage to the port, which handles roughly 98% of Israel's cargo imports, remains unclear. This strike is the promised Iranian retaliation, delivered not in the Strait of Hormuz as many intelligence analysts predicted, but directly at the heart of the Israeli economy. In a statement broadcast on Iranian state television, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, took full responsibility, calling the operation Oceans of Wrath and stating it was a proportional response to the Zionist regime's repeated aggressions, including its recent violations of the ceasefire in Syria. The statement warned, the era of hit-and-run is over. Any further aggression will be met with a response that is more crushing and broader in scope. For supporters of President Trump, this attack is being framed as the ultimate vindication of his administration's hardline stance. A senior advisor to the Trump campaign, speaking to Fox News, stated, "This is exactly what the president has been warning about for years. Iran is not a nation you negotiate with, it's a terrorist regime that targets civilians and economic centers. Their first move after the ceasefire was to launch a massive attack on a civilian port. This proves the so-called moderates in Iran are a myth, and the only language they understand is overwhelming strength." The military reality on the ground, however, is a frantic test of Israel's much-vaunted multi-layered defense system. The IDF confirmed its Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow missile defense systems were engaged, intercepting a significant number of the incoming threats. But the key question, from a military POV, is the saturation point. A former U.S. missile defense official, now with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, told CNN, "No system is 100%. When you fire enough missiles, some will get through. The real metric here isn't the interception rate, it's the cost-benefit analysis for Iran. They just forced Israel to expend millions, perhaps hundreds of millions, in interceptor missiles to defend a single target, and they still caused catastrophic damage. That's a strategic win in their book." The global economic shockwave was instantaneous. Brent crude oil futures, already elevated, skyrocketed by over 12% to breach $118 a barrel in Asian trading, according to data from Bloomberg. The direct targeting of a major logistics hub has analysts fearing a severe disruption to global supply chains. Haifa is a linchpin for Mediterranean trade, a shipping analyst with S&P Global Commodity Insights told the Financial Times. If operations are crippled for an extended period, you're looking at rerouted ships, massive delays, and a spike in freight costs that will be passed directly to consumers worldwide. Meanwhile, the political fallout is scrambling diplomatic channels. The full, horrifying scope of the strategic damage to the port of Haifa is now coming into focus, and it's a masterclass in economic warfare. Satellite imagery analyzed by private intelligence firm ImageSat International and shared with Reuters shows the attack wasn't a single wave, it was a calculated, multi-phase operation designed to inflict maximum, long-term paralysis. The initial missile barrage that breached the port's defenses was just the opening act. What followed were secondary, targeted explosions deep within the container storage yards, evidence, according to a former U.S. Army explosive ordnance disposal officer consulted by CNN, of pre-planted sabotage devices or follow-on strikes hitting fuel and chemical storage. This wasn't random, the source said. This was surgical. They knew where to hit to keep the fire burning and the chaos multiplying. The most catastrophic visual, however, is the state of the port's massive gantry cranes. At least 4 of the towering structures that move 98% of Israel's container imports are now twisted, blackened skeletons, toppled into the water or bent over shipping berths. A maritime engineering expert from Lloyd's List Intelligence told the Associated Press that replacing a single crane of that scale takes a minimum of 12 to 18 months from order to operation. With multiple cranes destroyed, the port's capacity to offload ships is effectively zero. You can clear rubble in weeks, the expert said. But you can't offload a mega-container ship with a bulldozer. The hardware is gone. On the ground, the scene is pure logistical chaos, a real-time POV of a national economic artery being severed. The IDF has locked down a 5-kilometer radius, but inside the cordon, it's a nightmare of tangled supply chains. Dozens of semi-trucks are stranded, their cargo, everything from consumer electronics to medical supplies, trapped inside burning or damaged containers. A shipping manager for ZIM Integrated Shipping Services, who fled the port during the attack, described the scene to Haaretz as a parking lot at the end of the world. He added, the data servers are down, the gates are destroyed, the customs office is rubble. Even if a ship could dock, there is no system to receive it. It is a complete systemic collapse. For supporters of President Trump, this detailed picture is the ultimate "I told you so" moment, proof positive that his maximum pressure campaign was the only sane policy. A Trump campaign surrogate, appearing on Newsmax, framed the technical destruction as strategic vindication. Look at the precision. Look at the planning, they stated. This is what $150 billion in sanctions relief under the failed Obama-Biden deal bought Iran, the capability to meticulously cripple a U.S. ally's economy. President Trump called them the world's leading state sponsor of terror. Today, they graduated to the world's leading state sponsor of economic terrorism. This is why you don't negotiate with a regime that gaslights the world while building missiles. The financial bleeding is immediate and quantifiable. According to a rapid assessment by the Israeli Finance Ministry, leaked to the financial news site Calculist, each day the port is non-operational costs the Israeli economy an estimated $250 million in delayed trade and emergency logistics. Insurance premiums for shipping in the eastern Mediterranean have, according to a bulletin from Marsh McLennan, skyrocketed by 300% overnight. Haifa is now a war risk zone, a London-based underwriter told Bloomberg. Every vessel heading there needs a special policy, if they can get one at all. Routes are being recalculated to Ashdod or Cyprus, adding days and millions in cost. But the strategic question hanging over the smoke is this: what is the full extent of the damage? Haifa, Israel, firefighters are in a losing battle against a toxic, billowing inferno at the port of Haifa, with thick black smoke choking the city for over 12 hours as of Tuesday morning, forcing a complete and indefinite shutdown of all maritime activity and triggering immediate, cascading supply chain failures across the region. The scene is a first responder's POV nightmare. According to a live update from Israel's fire and rescue services, multiple chemical storage tanks and burning shipping containers are fueling a plume visible from space, with toxic fumes forcing the evacuation of several adjacent industrial zones. We are facing extreme heat and the risk of further explosions, a battalion commander on the scene told Channel 12 News. The water supply to the port's main firefighting system was severed in the initial strikes. We are pumping from the sea, but we are not gaining control. With the port's gates sealed by the Israeli Defense Forces, the economic hemorrhage is instant. The Israeli Airports Authority confirmed to Reuters that all cargo flights into Ben Gurion Airport have been suspended indefinitely to prioritize emergency military and medical logistics, severing the country's last major aerial trade route. Meanwhile, regional shipping data from marine traffic shows a traffic jam of at least 27 commercial vessels, container ships, bulk carriers, and tankers, stranded outside the port's exclusion zone, unable to dock or receive instructions. For supporters of President Trump, this real-time economic cardiac arrest is the ultimate validation of his maximum pressure doctrine. A senior Trump campaign advisor, speaking to Breitbart, framed the crisis as a direct consequence of weak diplomacy. This is the Biden-Harris foreign policy in action: appeasement leads to emboldenment. You lift sanctions, you re-enter a nuclear deal that pumps billions into the IRGC's coffers, and what do you get? A regime with the resources and the gall to strategically cripple a U.S. ally's economy. President Trump's policy of crippling sanctions kept them in a box. Now, the world is seeing what happens when you let the terror state out. The supply chain impact is spreading at viral speed. In Tel Aviv, supermarket chains reported runs on staple goods, with images on social media showing empty shelves in the pasta and canned food aisles. A spokesperson for the Israeli Manufacturers Association stated in a press release, "We are already receiving reports from automotive and high-tech plants of production lines stalling due to just-in-time parts being stuck in Haifa. This is not a future problem, this is a right-now problem." The human cost is also mounting beyond the port's fence. Haifa's Rambam Healthcare Campus, the largest hospital in northern Israel, issued an urgent advisory for residents with respiratory conditions to remain indoors and use air purifiers due to the hazardous air quality. "We are seeing a 40% increase in emergency room admissions for asthma and breathing difficulties since the smoke plume settled," a hospital spokesperson told the Times of Israel. So, with Israel's primary economic gateway now a smoldering, inoperable wreck and the pressure building by the hour, the strategic question becomes unavoidable: will this crippling strike force Israel to the negotiating table?